Before we get started, can you picture a morning where you don't feel like you have 100 things to do before heading out the door? Well, my tried and true 5 lower carb breakfast recipes are here to help you do that and more. These recipes are packed with protein, healthy fats, and fiber to keep you full longer, so you're not battling those hunger pangs or sugar crashes by 10 a.m. And the best part, they're quick and easy to make the morning of or even beforehand, so you have a little leisure time in the morning to yourself before heading into work. If you're looking to have a little more peace of mind in the morning and avoid that mid morning crash that has you snacking before lunch, just head over to betterwithcarbo.com/breakfast to receive your free copy of the 5 lower carb, quick and easy breakfast recipes. That's betterwithcarbo.com/breakfast. I care deeply for health and nutrition, but I would be straight up lying to you if I told you to just don't eat the food. Like, I will be lying to you and setting you up for failure if I said, just don't eat it. You can't stop eating Twinkies? Then don't eat the Twinkies. Don't we all hate that advice anyway because we know that it doesn't work? Like when your husband tells you, just don't stress when you're like in the middle of some kind of mental health breakdown. Just don't be stressed. Like, I care deeply about long-term nutrition success, and because of that, we have to get to the root cause of overeating. You don't have to have an eating disorder diagnosis in order to have a disordered relationship with food, and a lot of us do, which is why we're overeating. I'm Chrissy Carbo, registered dietitian and host of the Inflames in the Brain podcast. Here, we cut through the confusion and complexity of inflammatory health to deliver straightforward, bite-sized strategies and information you can easily apply to your life. Not that long ago, I was lost in a sea of information and overwhelmed by the challenges of inflammation. But cut through years of trial, education, and self-discovery, I've learned to break free from the chaos of fad diets to cultivate a practical, anti-inflammatory lifestyle that not only helped me stabilize my own diagnosis, but thrive with it. Whether you're an autoimmune warrior yourself, or you're just trying to have a healthier, uncomplicated life, you're in the right place. Together, we'll explore realistic strategies that can make a profound difference in your life. So if you're ready to embrace a simpler, healthier way to live, let's dive in, learn, and grow together. Welcome to the Inflames in the Brain podcast. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Inflames in the Brain podcast. I'm Chrissy, your host and friendly neighborhood dietitian, and I hope that you're doing really well today. I hope you had a great summer. We took a little summer mental health hiatus, but we are back. And to be honest, I took a little time away from the podcast, a little more time than I had thought, to really be present with my family this summer. Last summer was a little rough, to say the least, since I was in the thick of postpartum anxiety and depression. But this year, I really wanted to be cognizant of how I spent my time, and I wanted to soak up some special moments with Arthur while he's still so little and growing so fast. And in the spirit of maintaining that kind of family life balance, I decided to release new podcast episodes every other week instead of weekly for now, just for now. But don't worry, I am still committed to providing you with valuable content that's going to keep you motivated and successful as you navigate your anti-inflammatory journey. So make sure that you're subscribed to my email list, because that's where I'm going to be sharing tips and my favorite anti-inflammatory foods and products and recipes in between these podcast episodes. So all you have to do, if you're not subscribed already, is head over to betterwithcarbo.com/email. I'll also include the link in the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this podcast episode, all you have to do is click on the link in the show notes, drop your name and your email, and we'll stay connected in between the weeks of the podcast episode release. Now that that little bit of housekeeping is done, today we're going to be talking about giving yourself unconditional permission to eat, aka eating what you want in order to lower inflammation for good. This is a textbook intuitive eating concept that is meant to help you fix your relationship with food, but the process of unconditional permission to eat can also really help a lot of us avoid high amounts of inflammatory exposure long term. Now, some people, even professional healthcare providers, may argue that intuitive eating concepts are reserved for people who have a concrete eating disorder diagnosis, and that fixing your relationship with food isn't necessarily priority when you're dealing with a health concern, like an inflammatory issue. But if you truly care about getting to and fixing the root cause of your inflammatory issues, I would argue the exact opposite. I believe that fixing your relationship with food is key to finding long term success with your anti inflammatory goals. Think about it for a second. Let's say you found out that you have lupus, which is just another inflammatory disorder. And in the beginning, you're scared, right? This is a new diagnosis, uncharted waters for you, and you're taking health into your own hands and cutting out all of the things that are remotely anti inflammatory from your life, which includes all of your favorite foods or most of your favorite foods. You may have even tried this in the past, like if you were trying to lose weight or be healthier and it didn't work, but like this is an actual serious diagnosis. So you're serious now. You're going to cut everything out and be successful. Okay. But eventually, you find yourself hungry, you're unsatisfied with the food that you've been eating, and you're overwhelmed because not only do you have this new diagnosis that you're trying to figure out, but you also have no idea what to eat because of all of the stuff that you like cause inflammation. Let's say, for example, you love pizza and you're newly diagnosed. At that moment, pizza is 100% a scary thing for you. You honestly believe that eating pizza will cause your diagnosis to get worse. So you keep eating foods that aren't satisfying. You're eating cauliflower crust, you're eating almond flour crust, you're choosing dairy-free cheese. And I mean, it doesn't taste so bad, but at the end of the day, sometimes you kind of just want actual pizza. But you don't let yourself have the pizza because it's a bad food. You can't eat pizza. It's a bad food. The gluten, the dairy, you're going to get worse. You avoid it. But that craving and the urge to eat like that New York style pizza just builds and builds and builds until one weekend you find yourself at a party or some kind of get together where there's that New York style around the corner pizzeria pizza. It's authentic, it's gluten full, it's cheesy. And you tell yourself, well, you've been good for this amount of time. So one slice isn't going to hurt, right? But then before you know it, instead of having one slice of pizza, you end up eating 6 slices of pizza because when are you ever going to get the opportunity to eat this kind of pizza again? And then you end up feeling guilty, you feel shameful, you're disappointed that you put pizza before your health. And for a lot of people, this happens pretty frequently with a few different foods. You restrict yourself from eating a certain food for various reasons, and then those foods end up becoming the same foods that you continue to overeat. And then that's when you run into issues like diabetes and autoimmunity and gut health issues, all of which are related to inflammation, by the way. So, if overeating these foods is what's causing these kinds of health issues, how can you stop overeating? The answer seems a little counterintuitive, but in order to stop overeating once and for all to avoid this kind of vicious inflammatory cycle, you need to stop restricting the food. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat that food. And like I said, it honestly, it does sound a little counterintuitive, especially to people who are hearing this kind of principle or concept of unconditional permission to eat in the beginning. But in this episode, we're going to talk about how this process can really help end the cycle of overeating and help you prevent inflammatory exposure long term. And that's what we want. We want long-term success. So let's get into it and start with, what exactly does unconditional permission to eat mean? It means allowing yourself to eat what you really want, eat foods that are going to be satisfying to you. It means letting go of the concept that there are good foods and bad foods. And it means eating without punishing yourself later for it. So we've all done something like this where we're like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to eat this food now, but I'm going to work out twice as hard tomorrow. or I'm going to eat this food now, but the diet starts on Monday. So that is giving yourself some kind of penance, like you're punishing yourself for eating that kind of food that you want to now. So we want to let go of that when we're giving ourselves unconditional permission to eat. And how exactly is this supposed to help you lower inflammation for good, right? Because aren't some of these foods that we're giving ourselves unconditional permission to eat, aren't some of them inflammatory? Well, I think the best way that I could answer this question is by explaining how food restriction could actually lead to inflammation. So, when we restrict foods and label them as good and bad, there becomes this kind of like preoccupation or even obsession with the food. When we restrict food, we give those certain foods power over us. So, if you're like, no cookies in the house because I'll eat the whole package, it's almost like this food has control over your willpower and has control over your ability to become healthier. And for me, this was Frosted Flakes. I could not have Frosted Flakes in the house because I could literally eat the whole box in a day. I'm not even lying. When I was living at home, especially, my mom knew how much I love Frosted Flakes. So when the box went on sale at the supermarket, she would buy me a box because her love language is food and feeding people. And with the box in the house, it's like I could feel its presence there. Like I can feel its presence in the kitchen. So I would tell myself, like, might as well just eat the whole box now to get it out of the way, get it out of the house. I know it's bad, but I can't waste the money that mom spent. And she was thinking of me. And, I don't want her to get upset. So I did that. I ate the box, literally the whole box in a day or two. Sometimes I really could eat it in a day, or maybe, I'd eat literally half of the box today, the other half tomorrow. But whenever I did finish that box, I felt incredibly shameful and guilty about it afterwards. Almost like the cereal had won and I failed, which is insane when I say it out loud, right? It's just cereal. Like, Jesus Christ, it's just cereal. But it's the truth. Foods that people restrict tend to be those that are higher on the pro-inflammatory spectrum. And those foods that people restrict also tend to be the foods that people overeat when presented with the opportunity. So what do you do when you want to stop overeating those inflammatory foods? Allow yourself to eat them when you really feel like you want to. When you allow yourself to give yourself unconditional permission to eat, that intensity and the urge and the desire to eat that food and the interest even kind of just goes away little by little. I was so tired of feeling like a grown-ass woman who couldn't control herself around Frosted Flakes. Again, it sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. It's almost like a little embarrassing to say. But what I did, I started buying it for myself and I had it around me more often. And I ate it when I felt like I wanted some. And I told myself that this cereal is always going to be there if I wanted more. And I ate different kinds of Frosted Flakes. I ate the Kellogg's brand. I ate the Trader Joe's brand. I ate the Whole Foods brand. I ate all the weird ass flavors that Kellogg's came out with. And since I gave myself the time and the space to do this, I had the time to taste the cereal. I wasn't scarfing it down in a whole day anymore. I could actually eat a bowl and taste the cereal. And eventually I was able to realize that this cereal is actually too sweet for my liking. And at this point, I like the Trader Joe's brand a little bit more than the Kellogg's brand because it's not as sweet and it doesn't mush in the cereal as fast. And after giving myself that kind of unconditional permission to eat the Frosted Flakes, I could have a box last a really long time in my house. And at the time of this recording, I actually do have a box of Frosted Flakes in my kitchen that at this point I've had for weeks. And that's a big deal. That's not something that I was able to do for up until like a few years ago. So when you do give yourself that unconditional permission to eat, you lose the urgency and interest to eat it. You might even realize that you don't like the food as much as you thought you did because you actually gave yourself the time to sit down and eat it and taste it. You'll probably even, once you do start allowing yourself to be around this food and to eat this food, you'll start to even turn it away, even when it's right in front of you. And not because of some, arbitrary diet rule that you heard that this food is bad because of X, Y, and Z, but you'll turn it down because you really don't want it anymore. You'll stop feeling shameful and guilty about eating it. That food loses whatever power it previously had over you. And most importantly, you stop overeating it. And if you stop overeating it and you're now even turning it down, you're reducing instances of inflammatory exposure for years, for like the rest of your life to come. So think about it. What food is your weakness? Like, what's that one food that you're like, I can't have this in the house. I can't have it while we're out to dinner, or else I'll eat the whole plate myself. What's that one food that you cannot be around? I mean, you can have more than one food. For me, like it was Frosted Flakes. It was also brownies. Brownies were this other food that I just could not be around. And again, after giving myself unconditional permission to eat the brownies, I was able to build this kind of like what I call tolerance to the richness. And I became super selective about my brownie of choice. Like I will only eat the most delicious brownie. And for me, that's the Ghirardelli double chocolate brownie. I won't even entertain the idea of another kind of brownie. But that is my point. When you give yourself the unconditional permission to eat, you really are starting to experience the food for what it is, and you become super selective about it. You know, like if you really love cake, like, and you give yourself unconditional permission to eat cake when you want to eat it, you'll start to develop like this preference. Like you'll only have a particular brand, you'll only have this particular kind of cake. You don't want to waste your time or your taste buds with any other kind of cake. You become picky about it, but like in a good way. Like if you're going to have the thing, you're going to have the thing that you want to have. You're not going to waste your time having a cake, a slice of cake, a bowl of cereal, a brownie that you know is not going to satisfy you. And again, this, instead of eating every single brownie that's in front of you, instead of eating every single slice of cake that's in front of you, you're really cutting back in the long term on how much cake and how much brownie, how much whatever food it is that you actually have. So try this out. Make a list of the foods that you feel like you've previously restricted, you've banned, you historically, you know that you overeat these kinds of foods. Think about those foods that you're trying so hard to avoid, and then just start with one at a time. Buy the food, have it in your kitchen, have it in the restaurant, allow yourself to eat it without any kind of penance afterwards, and know that eating this food does not make you a bad person. The only way that you will stop overeating this food is to go through the process of eating the food repeatedly. Sit down, have it around you, pay attention to the taste, the texture, take it in. And even though you're not here with me, I can hear your questions. So one of your questions might be like, if a particular food is inflammatory, shouldn't we avoid it? And my rebuttal here would be, well, haven't you tried that already? And how has that worked out for you so far? This is kind of like giving yourself unconditional permission to eat to help lower inflammation should be applied to those foods that you feel like you cannot stop eating. Like if dairy is one of those pro-inflammatory food groups that you're kind of minimizing exposure to, you were able to cut back a little bit and you're good. You're happy with your milk alternative. Don't start having lots of dairy. The principle here is really meant for that food that's in your head where you're telling yourself, like, I know this food is bad, but I can't stop eating it. We all have that one food. One fear here is that by allowing yourself to eat that food that you've been restricting for so long, you'll never stop eating it. But once again, once you keep telling yourself that that food is always available for you to eat, when you really want to eat it, that urgency and the intensity to eat large quantities of that food disappear. And the research actually shows that eventually you're going to get sick and tired of eating the same kind of food over and over and over again. When you repeatedly expose yourself to that same kind of food, you're enabling this habituation process that supports things getting less appealing over time. So think of like getting the newest iPhone. In the very beginning, you're super excited, you're exploring it, you can't stop touching it, you can't stop looking at it, you can't stop using it. But then seeing it every day, eventually it becomes less exciting and less appealing. So the same thing with food. If it's around you all the time, you expose yourself to it over and over again, it becomes less and less appealing. You lose interest, you stop overeating, and maybe you just stop eating it, period. Another question you have might be, well, what about the health risks that are associated with regular exposure to these foods? And again, I'm going to rebuttal with, okay, you've tried to restrict for so long before. How has that worked out for you? How many times have you overeaten that one food that you told yourself you'll never have again? As a dietitian, I advocate for health and nutrition. And I think if we lived thousands of years ago, it would be a lot easier to steer clear from these foods that we tend to overeat, mainly because they wouldn't exist. But these foods exist now. And we can get into the whole separate conversation as to why we overeat these foods and, ulterior motives, whatever, but that's besides the point. These foods exist now, and we overeat them, which contribute to inflammation and other health issues related to inflammation. And yes, I care deeply for health and nutrition, but I would be straight up lying to you if I told you to just don't eat the food. Like, I will be lying to you and setting you up for failure if I said, just don't eat it. You can't stop eating Twinkies? Then don't eat the Twinkies. Don't we all hate that advice anyway because we know that it doesn't work? Like when your husband tells you, just don't stress when you're like in the middle of some kind of mental health breakdown. Just don't be stressed. Like, I care deeply about long-term nutrition success. And because of that, we have to get to the root cause of overeating. You don't have to have an eating disorder diagnosis in order to have a disordered relationship with food. And a lot of us do, which is why we're overeating. So if you're looking to really improve your health long-term, you need to trust the process, the eating process. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat and be around the food, and eventually you'll stop overeating it. Maybe sooner, maybe a little later, but eventually you'll stop overeating it. And when you stop overeating it, you significantly cut back on your inflammatory exposure. Your diet will balance out and you'll find yourself wanting the complete opposite of the food that you're eating. And I also want to say that there isn't anything wrong with like experimenting and incorporating more anti-inflammatory substitutes in your diet. Like, find the ones that work best for you and use them if you like them. Like if you love pizza, going back to the beginning of our conversation, and maybe you're used to having pizza 3 days a week, and now you're dealing with this health issue where it's probably not the best idea for you to have pizza 3 times a week. I'm not saying to completely ignore, your health issue and have pizza 3 times a week. I'm not saying that you shouldn't look for better ingredients to maybe make pizza at home. There is nothing wrong with, and I encourage you to look for healthier alternatives and experiment with different alternatives that support your health. But if you find yourself really wanting an actual slice of pizza, have some pizza because that's going to prevent you from eating a whole pie to yourself later on if you continue to over restrict and ignore what it is that you really want. And before I go, I also want to clarify that this doesn't mean that you're eating whatever you want when you want in whatever kind of quantities that you want. Like a lot of people will oftentimes take that give yourself unconditional permission to eat to mean eat whatever you want when you want, however much you want. But it's also equally as important to respect your body and listen to it when it's genuinely hungry and when it's full. So yes, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat foods that are satisfying to you is important to heal your relationship with food, to stop overeating. But you also have to listen to, am I hungry? Am I just bored? Am I stressed? Tune into your hunger and satiety cues because it is as equally as important as giving yourself unconditional permission to eat to heal your relationship with food and avoid inflammation. I really hope that you found value in this episode. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I am at Better with Carbo on Instagram. Feel free to send me a message. Let me know what you think. Share this episode with a friend that you think would benefit from our conversation. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of our anti-inflammatory goodness here. Don't forget to go to betterwithcarbo.com/email so that I can continue to support you outside of this podcast. I can't wait to talk more with you soon. Bye for now.